The night I discovered my husband was having an affair, I truly believed my world was over. But the woman he was seeing, she wasn't the real secret. She was just the key to unlocking a truth that was so much more sinister, something he'd buried for 10 long years. His betrayal, it turned out, was just a distraction. A flimsy curtain pulled over a crime that had not just stolen my heart, but someone else's entire life. Our life in Northwood, Georgia, was supposed to be a painting of Southern perfection. I was the loving wife, Mark was the devoted husband, and our 9-year-old daughter, Lily, was the son our universe revolved around. We had the sprawling colonial with the wraparound porch, the ancient oaks dripping Spanish moss, the whole 9 yards. Mark wasn't just my husband, he was the town's golden boy. He ran a successful construction business, served on the town council, and coached Little League. When he walked into a room, people just lit up. He had this easy, confident charm. He was a good man, at least that's what everyone said, and I believed them. How could I not? Mark was the man who had saved me. 10 years ago, my world had completely imploded. My first husband, David, the love of my youth, went on a hiking trip in the Appalachians and never came back. They said it was a sudden rockslide, a tragic accident. They never even found his body in that deep, unforgiving ravine. The grief was a physical weight that left me unable to breathe. David was my everything. We were high school sweethearts who'd mapped out our whole future on the back of a napkin. Lily was only a few months old when he was ripped away from us. Mark was David's best friend. He was the one who held me up at the memorial service. He came over every single day for months, sometimes just to sit in silence with me, other times to fix a leaky faucet I couldn't bring myself to call a plumber for. He brought us groceries. He played with Lily and made her giggle when all I could do was cry. He so slowly, so patiently pieced my shattered life back together, so when he told me he loved me a year later, it felt safe. I loved him for it. I loved him for being the rock in my raging sea. He adopted Lily and raised her with such tenderness that the memory of David eventually softened from a sharp, open wound to a distant ache. Our whole life was built on that foundation of his goodness. Our days had a comfortable rhythm, breakfast together, the smell of coffee and bacon in the kitchen, Mark always slipping Lily a piece of candy at school drop-off with a little wink. My quiet, fulfilling job at the local library, and then there was Chloe, my best friend, my sister. We'd known each other since I first moved to Northwood with David. She was my person, the one who knew all my secrets. Or so I thought. She and Mark were leading a town beautification project together, and I was so proud, so happy that the two most important people in my life got along so well. Those late-night planning sessions and weekend meetings, that was just the price of having such dedicated, civic-minded people in my life. The painting was perfect, but I was about to find out the canvas was a lie and the paint was hiding a decade of rot. The first tiny crack in our perfect life appeared on a Tuesday. It was such a small thing, I almost missed it. Mark and Chloe were in the kitchen, heads bent over blueprints for a new park gazebo. I walked in with 2 glasses of iced tea and joked, "You two are spending so much time together, people are going to start talking." The reaction was instant, and it was weird. Mark's head snapped up, his smile tight and fake. Chloe dropped her pen and a splash of red ink bled across the plans. They glanced at each other for just a second, but I saw something flicker between them. Panic maybe, then it was gone. Chloe let out a laugh that was a little too high. "Oh, you know us," she said, "married to the job." Mark just grunted and turned back to the blueprints, his shoulders suddenly tense. The air in the room felt heavy and a chill went up my spine that had nothing to do with the iced tea. That was the first thread I pulled, and everything began to unravel. Suddenly, I saw things I'd been blind to. The late-night planning sessions always happened when I was at my book club. Mark's phone, which used to be left out on the counter, was now always in his pocket, screen down. He started taking calls in the garage, claiming the reception was better. Once, I picked up his blazer from the dry cleaners, and a receipt for a fancy, discreet hotel an hour away fell out. The charge was for a Wednesday night when he was supposedly at a builders conference in Atlanta, 2 hours in the other direction. When I confronted him, he was a master of gaslighting. He looked at me with those honest, concerned eyes and told me I was being ridiculous. "Honey, work has been so stressful, I must have just gotten the towns mixed up. Are you okay?" "You seem a little paranoid lately." He was so convincing that for a moment I actually felt ashamed. Crazy, but the doubt was a splinter I couldn't get out of my mind. The final, gut-wrenching proof was on our credit card statement. A charge from the Dahlia, a famously romantic restaurant 50 miles away. The date was our anniversary. I'd been home with the stomach flu, and he claimed he was working late, even bringing home a sad takeout container as proof. He'd been so sweet, checking on me, promising we'd celebrate when I felt better. My hands started shaking. With a sickening feeling, I logged into our phone account online. The records were right there. On our anniversary, while I was sick in bed, he'd made a dozen calls to Chloe's number. And his phone's location data placed him on the exact same street as that romantic restaurant. The confrontation was quiet, ugly. I couldn't even scream. I just laid the credit card statement and the phone records on the dining table. He looked at them, then at me, and tried to lie. He spun some pathetic story about a client meeting. The lies were so transparent, they were insulting. I just stared at him until the words dried up. His face, the face I had trusted for a decade, crumpled, not with remorse, with annoyance. "Fine," he finally spat. "It happened. It's not what you think. It didn't mean anything." It didn't mean anything. The two people I trusted most in the world had been betraying me. The affair was devastating, but with Chloe, my sister, that was a different kind of pain. It wasn't just my marriage they betrayed, it was my entire life. That night, as he snored in the guest room, I moved through our perfect house like a ghost. I packed a bag for me and one for Lily. I grabbed the emergency cash I kept hidden in a shoebox. I crept into Lily's room and just watched her sleep, her face so peaceful, so unaware her world was about to be torn apart for the second time. I lifted her into my arms and she murmured "Daddy" in her sleep. A sob caught in my throat. Which one was she dreaming of, the dead hero or the living liar? I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I strapped my sleeping daughter into her car seat, the click of the buckle echoing in the silent garage. As I drove away, I saw the single light I'd left on in the hallway in my rearview mirror, a beacon to a life that was no longer mine. I had no plan. I just drove, pushing the accelerator to the floor as if I could outrun the mushroom cloud of my imploding life. For hours, I just drove on pure adrenaline. The anger and grief came in waves, so powerful they left me breathless. One minute, I was consumed by rage at Mark and Chloe. The next, a chasm of sorrow would open up so deep I felt like I was falling. I was 35 with a sleeping child in the back, a few $1,000s in my purse, and no idea where I was going. Just before dawn, exhaustion hit me like a wall. I saw a glowing sign ahead, the Mason Jar Diner, open 24 hours. It was across the state line in some forgotten corner of Tennessee. I pulled into the gravel lot. The diner was a time capsule, red vinyl booths cracked with age, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee. It was the complete opposite of my pristine life, and honestly, it was a relief. I slid into a booth, laying a still sleeping Lily on the seat beside me. The waitress poured me a coffee without a word, her eyes kind but not pitying. She'd seen this story 1,000 times. I was on my second cup when I felt it, that prickling sensation of being watched. I looked up and saw a man at the far end of the counter. He was wiry and gaunt, with a deep, jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw, pulling one side of his mouth into a permanent grimace. And he wasn't looking at me, he was staring at Lily. My body went on high alert. My hand gripped my car keys in my purse. I glared at him, trying to send a clear message, back off. But his eyes, a startlingly familiar shade of blue, were filled with this strange, aching intensity. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, he slid off his stool and started walking toward us. My heart hammered against my ribs. He stopped a few feet from our table, his hands held up peacefully, his focus still entirely on Lily. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, gravelly rasp. "Sunshine," he whispered. The word hit me like a lightning strike. My blood ran cold. The diner, the truckers, it all just faded away. Only one person in the world had ever called Lily that. It was a name that had been buried with him in that ravine 10 years ago. I stared at the man, really looked at him, past the scar, past the hardship etched into his face, and I saw him, the shape of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed. And those eyes, God, those eyes, they were David's eyes. "No," I breathed. It can't be. He finally turned his gaze to me and the recognition was absolute. It was him, my David, my dead husband, standing in a greasy spoon diner in the middle of nowhere looking like a ghost. The affair, the betrayal, the escape, it all suddenly seemed like a minor prelude to this impossible, terrifying, miraculous moment. My husband was alive, and that single earth-shattering fact was about to change everything. The coffee grew cold, Lily slept on, David, it was really him, slid into the booth across from me. He moved slowly like he was afraid I might run. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. He started to talk, his voice cracking. His story was a nightmare. He remembered the hike with Mark, the view from the ridge. He remembered turning to say something to Mark and then a blinding pain at the back of his head. He remembered falling, then nothing. He'd woken up weeks later in a rural clinic hundreds of miles away, found by a trucker at the bottom of a service road. His ID was gone. The head injury caused profound amnesia. He knew his name was David, but that was it. The past was a thick fog. The scarred man in the mirror was a stranger. For 10 years, he'd lived as a ghost, drifting from town to town, haunted by flashes of a life he couldn't grasp, a woman's laugh, the scent of baby powder, a tiny hand wrapped around his finger. About a month ago, in a public library, he'd typed his own name into a search engine. This time, a link popped up, an article from the Northwood newspaper, Mark Hansen honored for decade of community service, and there was a picture. A picture of Mark smiling his charming smile. Standing next to him was me, and holding my hand was a little girl with David's eyes. Seeing our faces, he said, brought everything rushing back. He remembered me. He remembered Lily. He remembered his life, and he remembered who he was with on that ridge. Mark, his best friend. He didn't come for help, did he? David asked, his voice a whisper, already knowing the answer. I just shook my head, a single tear tracing a hot path down my cheek. They said it was a rock slide, I choked out. Mark said he tried to find you, but it was too dangerous. He said he went for help. The lie was so ugly in the dim diner light. Mark hadn't gone for help, he'd left David for dead. He hadn't just comforted a grieving widow, he had created *1. He stood at David's memorial and played the part of the devastated best friend, knowing he was the architect of my pain. He hadn't just stolen a marriage, he had stolen an entire life. We needed proof. David's story against the word of Northwood's golden boy was just that, a story. Then David remembered something. Mark was obsessive about documenting their trips with a digital camera and a small, leather-bound journal. He never went anywhere without it, David insisted. If that journal exists, he kept it, it's his trophy. The thought made me sick, but I knew he was right. Mark was a narcissist, he'd need to relive his victory. The plan was terrifying. I had to go back. I called Mark, my voice trembling but steady, and told him I'd overreacted, that I needed to come home and talk. His relief was disgusting. He said he had a big meeting but would be home for dinner. It was the window we needed. Leaving David and Lily at the motel was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Driving back into Northwood felt like entering enemy territory. I went straight to his office, my heart pounding. It was a shrine to himself. I searched his desk and filing cabinets. Nothing. My panic started to rise. Then I remembered David's word, digital. I turned on his computer, password protected. I tried Lily's birthday, our anniversary. Nothing. I thought, what is most important to him? His ego. I typed Northwood Legacy. The screen unlocked. I navigated to a folder labeled Personal, then a subfolder called Archives, and finally a folder labeled The Summit. It was filled with photos from that hiking trip 10 years ago, pictures of David, young and vibrant and smiling, and then a series of text files. My hand shook as I clicked on Reflections. It was a digital diary. The first entry was dated the day after David's accident. It's done, it began. He's gone. No one will ever look for him there. It was easier than I thought. She'll be devastated, of course, but I'll be there to pick up the pieces. A new foundation can be built on the ruins of the old one. I scrolled down, my vision blurring with rage, and then I found the real truth. There were recent entries. He had found out David was alive about a year ago. He'd been tracking him. The most recent entry from just 3 days ago laid it all bare. He's getting closer. The pie says he's been searching his own name. The affair with Chloe is getting messy, but it's a necessary chaos. If it all comes out, she'll be my distraction. Everyone will focus on the scorned wife and the homewrecker. No one will be looking for the real story. The affair wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. A calculated, sociopathic plan to discredit me, to turn me into a hysterical woman whose accusations would be dismissed when the truth about David came out. He was going to use my pain as his escape hatch. I copied everything onto a flash drive. I had his trophy, I had the proof, and I was going to burn his perfect world to the ground. The confrontation wasn't in our home. I wouldn't give him that advantage. We met at my lawyer's office the next day to discuss divorce terms. When Mark walked in, he was the picture of concerned contrition. "I'm so sorry it's come to this," he began. "I'm sure you are," I said, my voice flat. Just then, a side door opened. David walked in. The mask on Mark's face didn't just slip, it shattered. The color drained from his face. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with a primal terror. He looked at David like he was seeing a ghost. "No," he whispered, you're dead." "No thanks to you," David said, his voice a low growl. My lawyer, Sarah, slid the flash drive into her laptop and turned a large monitor towards Mark. "We have the files from your computer, Mark," she said. "The summit, your reflections." She clicked open the first file. The words appeared on the screen, huge and damning. "It's done, he's gone." Mark just stared, his breathing ragged, looking for an escape route where there wasn't one. The pillar of the community was exposed. The aftermath was a blur: attempted murder, fraud, kidnapping by depriving a father of his child. The weight of the law came crashing down on him. His perfect reputation evaporated overnight. The town was in shock. How could the man who coached their kids' baseball teams be a monster? People kept asking me, "How could you not have known?" It was a question I was still asking myself. And Chloe, faced with being an accomplice, her loyalty crumbled. She told the police everything, painting herself as another victim. Her testimony was the final nail in his coffin. Seeing her on the witness stand, crying crocodile tears, I felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. The custody battle was short. A DNA test proved David was Lily's father. Mark's parental rights, established by fraud, were terminated. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. The last time I saw him being led away in handcuffs, his face was a mask of impotent rage. He wasn't a criminal mastermind, he was just a thief. After the trial, the silence was deafening. Northwood was no longer home, it was a graveyard of a life that was never really mine. I sold the house and didn't look back. Everyone wanted to know if David and I would get back together, if our tragedy would have a storybook ending. But life is messier than that. We were strangers who shared a child and a history of trauma. The boy I loved was gone, replaced by a man hardened by a decade of survival. And the girl he loved was gone, too, replaced by a woman who had learned to be a fortress. We didn't get back together. We did something harder, more honest. We chose to build something new. I moved to a small town in Tennessee, not far from that diner. David got an apartment nearby. We became co-parents. We started having family dinners where Lily sat between the father she was just getting to know and the mother who was just learning to breathe again. It was awkward and painful and, in a way, beautiful. There were moments of grace. Watching David teach Lily how to skip stones, seeing the trust in Lily's eyes when she started calling him Dad. Hearing myself laugh, a real laugh, on the phone with him. We weren't rebuilding the past. We were creating a future built not on a perfect lie but on a complicated, messy, and resilient truth. My life is quiet now. I work at another library. I have a small garden. I watch my daughter grow. The rage has faded into a quiet strength I never knew I had. Mark tried to steal my life, but he only succeeded in showing me what was truly mine. My daughter, my strength, my future. He took so much, but in the end, he gave me back the one thing I had truly lost: myself. I am no longer a victim in his story. I am the author of my own. If you've ever had your world turned upside down or had to find the strength to start over from nothing, I want to hear from you. Share your story of resilience in the comments below, because your story matters. And if this resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about survival,